Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. Jofra Archer is back. He took 6 for 40 in his second game back from injury for England as they fell to a 2-1 series defeat to South Africa. We'll talk about that series, some Women's World Cup news, some Border-Gavaskar Trophy preview chat and more. I'm Yas Rana and with me today is Mark Butcher and Ben Gardner. Let's start with the England-South Africa ODIs. South Africa won the series 2-1. England collapsed from 146 for none to 271 all out in the first game. South Africa chased down 342 in the second. And then England recovered from 20 for 3 after the power play to score 346 before Archer took that 6 for in his second game back from injury. The Run Out blog asks, what is it that makes Jofra so good? What is it that sets him apart from the rest? Butch, do you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, so many different things, really. I suppose number one is sort of there's great accuracy about what he does. There's great pace. The ball comes down from a very great height. He has a snap of the wrist that means the short ball is very, very difficult to pick up for people. He's clever. He reads game situation. He reads batters really well. He's the full package. You ally all of those attributes with a feeling for the sport, and you've got a very dangerous customer. It's a little bit like if Sam Curran were kind of like 6'4" and 90 miles an hour. Archer has got all of the sort of the street smarts of somebody like Sam Curran, but you ally that then with a sort of like a supreme fast bowling athlete, and you've got somebody very, very special on your hands. Just the ball that he hit Aidan Markram with, the bouncer, kind of watched the replay 6 or 7 times. I was trying to suss out why. That batters find that short ball so difficult. And I think it's literally because the action stays pretty much the same. He stays very, very upright. And it really is a snap of the wrist at the last second that kind of changes the length from being something you'd be thinking about getting forward to something that you're eating.
So at that level, as a batter, are you looking for tells from the bowler as to what length the ball's going to be?
Yeah, you pick them up. I mean, that's kind of, you face people and you get to... It's slightly subconscious. You understand. You might pick something up in the delivery stride. You might pick something up as the back foot lands. There are all kinds of tells, and I couldn't tell you what they are because it was just something that was automatic once you'd played against somebody for a little while. But obviously with Jofra, there's a real issue in terms of picking up that tell. So yesterday, with the effortlessness of it all, which again we've spoken about before in terms of how that can make him a target for people saying that he's being lazy, because clearly it isn't effortless, but because it seems as though everything is so smooth and so rhythmical, it also doesn't give the batter any idea that there's an effort ball coming, because there is seemingly no effort, right? So, he's very, very special. And what was a great thing to see yesterday was not so much, the pace was up and all the rest of it and the wickets, but just how engaged he was in the contest yesterday. How pleased he was to be back, how much he celebrated the wickets, and how genuinely in the contest he was. Because, he's been out for a long, long time and he's still earned a boatload of cash even without playing. And he said how much he enjoyed being away injured because he was able to get away from the game. And cynical people, and I'm actually not being cynical in this case, might have said, well, blimey, what have you missed? You've only been playing for 5 minutes. But you do wonder if maybe the sort of, the competitive edge has been drained away from somebody by basically having it all without having to do a great deal. But that certainly didn't look to be the case yesterday. So wonderful stuff.
There have been studies done, I think, on where batters look when a fast bowler is running up, because you'll hear sometimes people talk about you got to watch the ball all the way down and that sort of thing, but actually what the scientists found is that the eyes would be sort of trained on the bowl of the ball as the bowler is running in, but then as soon as the ball's delivered, the eyes refocus to basically like a spot on the pitch vaguely where they think the ball is going to bounce, and then you kind of pick it up from there, and then from there that's where you kind of readjust to play the shot, I guess. And they'll say that it's too quick when it's coming down, but beyond a certain speed you actually can't really see it between release and pitching.
I heard something yesterday. Jared Kimber was talking about sort of like one of those studies, and the fact that a professional batter, if on release you switch the light off, or just after release you switch the lights off, a professional batter would still be in a vaguely the right position to play it. and an amateur batter wouldn't, because that you kind of pick up where you are picking up the length and everything happens much earlier on in the piece, and that you actually probably don't track the ball all the way down until the point where it's bounced. I remember talking to my old man about sort of the difference between seeing the ball early or being able to get yourself into position early and feeling like you're picking it up early and making time for yourself was focusing on what you thought or hoped the ball was going to do, i.e. trying to play it off the wicket or looking for a spot on the pitch where you thought it was coming, was disastrous. And that what you needed to do was train yourself to kind of watch the ball out of the hand and then allow the brain and you to transmit the signals to your body, and then trust the eyes to get you in the right spot. And that quite often when players are out of nick, they start to kind of look for things rather than look at things, if you see what I mean. But I'm not arguing with science, because all of those things make sense to me. But the one thing that is very difficult to explain is as to why, once you'd played against a bowler, that for the first time might only be for 10 balls or something in a net, you would have your brain builds a little bit of a picture about what potentially could be happening and the things that might change what might be coming down out of a bowler's action.
You mentioned his accuracy, and I do wonder. You obviously bowled a bit as well, but when if someone who's not played that much cricket watches an international, and you're like, why have they bowled a leg stump half volley? Why have they bowled a half volley miles outside off stump? That's quite often because you're trying to bowl a magic ball, right? You're trying to swing it in, you're trying to bowl it away. Sometimes it's just because you're not particularly accurate. But with Archer, he doesn't really try to swing it loads. Like his stock ball is so good, and he nibbles it just enough off the seam. He doesn't actually need to try to do that much. And I think that is partly why he's so accurate. Like I think of other guys who are that quick, they're quite slingy quite often, and he's just like gun barrel straight.
He's a line bowler. I mean, he's a line bowler with extreme pace, which is a really nasty combination. But I mean, but bowlers often the ball doesn't go where they are meaning it to go. I mean, don't think for a second that a guy will run up and be able to bowl it exactly where they want it the whole time. Sometimes the action goes a bit funny. They might, the delivery stride, they might not quite take off. The timing might be slightly off, and you're trying to bowl a line and length ball moving away from the batter on off stump, and it goes spiraling down the leg side. That type of bad ball down the leg side is not always because they were looking for the leg stump Yorker. Sometimes they're bowling something completely different. They're not machines, but Archer at his very best has that sort of the action has that sort of functionality where everything just seems to be in the right place at the right time, and therefore the accuracy comes with that.
But the difference, as you say, to other bowlers who you might say have very like people often talk about Chris Woakes' actions being almost like too smooth, too perfect. It allows bowlers to pick it up really easily. But I guess I think the wrist does make quite a big difference to how good Archer is, because if you think the point with the picking length thing is that when you're bowling a bouncer, for most bowlers, that's because their arm is that much further forward in their swing. So that gives you quite a lot more of a cue as a batter. Whereas if all it is just that much of the wrist, basically, then that's no clue at all. And if his line is the same every single ball, and you basically have no idea what the length is going to be, it sounds like a nightmare.
It makes life very, very unpleasant. And if you watch Jofra, sometimes when the camera tracks, will track the bowlers from side on as they run in, and you kind of watch where this hand is on the ball and see how long the sort of like the hand is to the tips of the fingers from sort of like the wrist bones. There's a real sort of length in terms of that lever there. So you've got an extra piece, and all the best quick bowlers, think about somebody like Wasim Akram, for example, would always talk about sort of like the snap of the wrist being the thing that gives that extra bit of backspin on the ball, gives that little bit of extra bit bounce, rifles the ball more when you're trying to swing it, and all of those things. And so that that's very much a part of what all fast bowlers try to do. But if that lever on you happens to be a third longer than the next guy, then you have another weapon there that is very potent for you.
That six was great because you kind of, that first ODI, I mean, remember you said last week's pod that he'd said before the series that he was only 80% fit, and I thought that he actually bowled quite well in that first ODI, even though he went for loads of runs.
I thought as well,
but it was like 80% of his balls were really good, and then the other 20% South Africa scored loads of runs off, and at that point you think like, okay, maybe this will just take a little bit of time, maybe we do just need to think, just readjust our expectations a bit. And then in his second game, he's sort of the Jofra Archer we kind of all knew he could be. It's England's third best ever figures. And,
and also, so he'd never taken a 4 for an ODI before, but he had taken a 3 for in not far off half of his England appearances. So yeah, he's quite something. Ollie, I thought it was a pretty good series for England despite the 2 losses. I think because some of the bowlers are rusty, some of them are coming back from long injury layoffs. They weren't tactically as on it as they would be in a crunch World Cup game. So, for example, Archer wasn't opening the bowling in the second game, so obviously he did quite well, but they probably weren't quite as on it intensity-wise as they would be in a big game. And they're also possibly without 3 of their top 6 that will start the World Cup. But one of the big selection debates will be who partners Bairstow at the top if he is fit. Roy scored 100 in the opener, has an excellent overall career record in ODI cricket, but Dawid Malan is their in-form ODI player other than Buttler at the moment. And I thought that innings in the third ODI was amazing, accelerating from 41 off 72 to 118 off 140.
No, it was astonishing. He made what? He was 29 off 60 balls or 64 balls or something, and it just looked for all the world as though he'd never held a bat before for most of it. I mean, the pitch was tricky in the first 15 overs or so of the game, and he just, the shoulders were slumped, and he just, wry smiles, and then just staring quizzically at the pitch, like, when am I ever going to find the middle of the bat? And then, the pitch dried out. Obviously, it rained very heavily the night before, and he swept one, didn't he? I think he swept Wayne Parnell for 6, almost like a sort of shit or bust sort of thing. If I get out, I'm probably doing the team a favour. Yeah. But he caught it and it sailed over the boundary, and then from there on in, he did. It was an incredible innings. And I think he's a fantastic player. I do think, however, if England have Bairstow to pick, and if Roy continues, if he makes a few more runs or whatever, that will be the opening partnership again. So Dawid Malan may well miss out altogether because Root will bat 3. Brook will bat 4, and then you've got Buttler 5 and potentially Stokes at 6, haven't you? If he decides that he fancies playing in the World Cup, and that would be it, I think.
Do you think Brook's definitely ahead of Malan? Again, in ODIs, Malan's strike rate is never going to be a problem.
No,
and Brook just hasn't played much 50 over cricket. Full stop.
No, but I don't think that is going to bother them about him particularly. I just think that they see somebody that has got so many attributes and is such a fine player that they'll want him in there. So I'd be unbelievably surprised. But the thing is with Malan, if Bairstow doesn't make it, or Roy form doesn't warrant selection by the time we get down to there, then they've got somebody that can perform that role. So I don't think England are all that fussed about it at the moment. I think they're quite happy that there are some players who are not available for selection at the moment. It means they get to widen their pool and play a few more guys. They have a pretty good idea about what their best 11 might be if everyone were available. But they're also building up a great sort of a great dossier of other guys who can come in and fulfill those roles if for any reason they can't have exactly what they want. So in the past, England would have panicked. I think, you lose 5 games on the bounce, and even though 3 of those were that ridiculous series in Australia, didn't play particularly well last summer either in ODI cricket. There would have been a lot of panic and a lot of sort of hand-wringing about what the state of the ODI team in the lead up to the World Cup. I think I find that would be as far away from their thinking as is possible. I think they're absolutely where they want to be with it. And that also, South Africa played unbelievably well in both of the 2 games that they won. The bowling performance to stop England from winning in the first game was sensational. Nortje and Magala, fabulous, and the run chase. I mean, they never looked like not chasing it down, did they? They got ahead of the rate and stayed there, which is takes some doing. As you say, England's bowlers looked a little bit rusty. Wokes is short of a gallop, and Rashid didn't look particularly on it in the second game, but certainly did in the third. And so again, it's more a case that England it's a progression. They're looking much further down the track and not too focused on reversals at this particular stage.
Yeah, I guess also it's obviously fun to talk about what the pecking order might be and that sort of thing, but England don't really have to think about that yet. For Bangladesh, it seems like Bairstow probably won't be back, so Roy and Malan will open there. Brook will bat at 4. I guess one thing that will come into their decision making is that the World Cup is in India, which makes this Bangladesh series a even more important one almost than this South Africa one.
And you've got a really good stat on this.
Yeah, well, yeah. So the only team to have beaten Bangladesh in an ODI series at home or in Bangladesh since the 2015 World Cup were Jos Buttler's England, actually, in 2016 when he captained them for the first time, I think. And that was also a really good series. It was 2-1. Butler got a bit feisty at one point. But so that'll be against a very good team in similar-ish conditions to the World Cup, and also conditions almost more extreme in a way. So you'll get more of a test of that kind of those things that maybe Roy Malan don't have quite as much. That I think that really works in Brook's favour, I guess, that we know he can play spin that well. And also, I think it's possible that Malan bats at 4 at the World Cup for sure, but England would almost, I think they'd rather have Malan over Roy than Malan than Brook, because you'd want that kind of that type of player who can sort of come in. That's where Malan's slower starts could be more of an issue at number 4, whereas Brook, we kind of know, can kind of come in and pick up the tempo of an innings very quickly.
Also, I mean, Ben Duckett has had a quiet time in South Africa, and the ball bouncing is something that is a slight concern about Ben and the way that he plays with that 3/4 bat outside off stump, which is fine on low bouncing pitches, but when the ball bounces a bit more and there's a bit more pace on it, can be tricky. However, if there is a scenario ahead where Roy's form doesn't come back to the degree that anybody would want it to be, and that Besso doesn't make it at all, and you're talking about India, so Duckett being in the fold and having an opportunity to play in these one-day internationals while England are kind of keeping their big guns out of it, is another great way of making sure that perhaps you've got another man who is, opened the batting in Pakistan in Test matches, played magnificently in the 7-match T20 series in Pakistan, prior to the World Cup. And so there's another guy that's kind of there just in case all of the other best laid plans don't work out for you. So all of these things are handy.
What's a 3/4 bat?
Well, rather than off the back foot outside off stump, it's neither sort of like a back foot punch with the vertical bat, the toe pointing towards the floor, or a genuine sort of square cut horizontal, trying to lash it with a horizontal bat over the thing. He kind of plays that sort of somewhere in between the two, and the 2 dismissals that he had in the series of I think it was Ngidi was 1 and
Nortje was 1.
Nortje was the other. Were both sort of like a sort of a 3/4, neither back foot punch, neither square cut. That because the ball bounced that little bit more, you nick it to the keeper.
I sometimes think that about Brook as well. Like in the T20 World Cup, he'd get out playing that shot a few times.
Right, and Joe Root also. Yeah, I mean that's another one of his dismissals, isn't it? When the run down to third man isn't working quite so well, you can do that too. But that obviously the other subplot with Duckett is that you've got an Ashes series coming up, which I'm sure we'll get to, and whether or not that England see him as their opening batter now after his success in Pakistan, or whether or not that was very much a horses for courses pick. I tend to think that it wasn't horses for courses, but there is the area that would cause that needs a bit of attention from himself, in terms of batting against the new ball, against quicker bowlers on bouncier pitches. That's all.
Yeah, and I don't think he should be, and we're getting a bit away from the ODI series, but if he were to struggle, if him and Zach Crawley were to have the same bad series in New Zealand, if that makes sense, I think it would be more like to stick with Crawley than with Duckett. I think that'd be the right thing to do.
What gives you that impression?
I think.
Why would you think that?
I think we should probably talk about Roy a little bit more, because I think if these 3 games were the other way around, we'd be talking about him loads right now. Like that 100 in the first game, that was brilliant, and it wasn't in a way like Malan's in the third game, in that it wasn't like he was scratching to find form and then suddenly found it. It was just as if he'd never been away, and it was crazy because there was no indication of it even in the SA20, which was in the same conditions, in the same obviously country, against lesser bowlers you'd expect. And he was struggling there, and then he comes back in, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I'm Jason Roy, I'm one of the best ODI batting they've ever had, and I'm going to play like it. And he is like that. Like obviously he's so sort of, he seems so confident. He walks with this kind of strut, his shoulders sway. He opening bowlers like feared sort of, it's almost like the first 4 he hits, he could have won the game from that point on sometimes. But there is actually almost as if that's a front, I think. I don't think that he is a player who has so much self-belief. He can be very streaky, very sort of susceptible to bouts of form. And we saw it in 2017 when he got dropped during the Champions Trophy, and then only came back into the side when there was the Hale Stokes thing in Bristol, and that's what gave him his go again. But even before that, I think there had been, there wasn't, you wouldn't expect him to come back in, and he was brilliant again straight away at that point as well. It can just be like a switch is flicked. And then I think he spoke to Phil either during the summer after that, and basically spoke about the fact that he wasn't sure how much he was still like fancying playing cricket. Basically, that's how bad the form had got. That's how much he was doubting himself and that sort of thing. And so that's why I think he's also worth sticking with, because it can just be a matter of he will get back and all of a sudden he'll be that player we knew again. And when he is that player, there is no doubt that he is in England's best 11, I guess.
Yeah, and I wrote a thing on the website after the first game. People, I think, forget how good he is at ODI cricket, and they lump the two white ball formats together a bit too much. So even when Roy's at his best, he's never actually been that good a T20 player. He's never been that much further ahead than the pack of lots of good England white ball openers. With an ODI cricket, I think his average is now just dipped under 40. But after the first game, in the history of ODI cricket, only Roy and Bairstow had scored 2,000 runs opening at a strike rate of over 100 and an average over 40. Like, that's the level of ODI player we're talking about.
Yeah, and again, I see the England, the people that matter, the people who pick the team, they know all this, and so that's why they've stuck with him. We can talk, and people on Twitter and whatever can kind of give their opinions about it, but until such a time as they think that Jason Roy, in terms of his mental state, really is busted, then they're going to play him because they back him to come good. And I think the great thing about the innings and the series that's just gone is that he looked like he was genuinely back in the right frame of mind again, and from there on runs will come.
Ben, South Africa are now in a decent position to qualify automatically for the World Cup. They looked very good. And at the end of the day, England's only win was when South Africa were without Nortje and Rabada.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like more so than ever before, the ability to take middle over wickets is absolutely essential in ODIs. And when they've got Nortje, they've got someone who's pretty much as good at it as anyone in the world.
Yeah, well, that was the key moment in the first game, was his dismissal of Buttler. And this was Buttler who was set in a smallish chase. That should be, you wouldn't ever doubt Buttler from there, and yet it was just Nortje's skill that got him rather than anything else. And he is absolutely brilliant. I mean, obviously he's absolutely rapid as well, but he is he is a bowler that is the pace is his main weapon, but he's accurate enough and has the skills that he will be a threat even when the ball isn't new or old, and even when there's no sort of imperative to take him on, I guess. And yeah, South Africa are really, really good. I mean, I don't know if we'll talk about Stokes' claim that the schedule was England's main issue in ODIs. In a way, it is the schedule, in that the schedule has had England playing 4 very good teams in a row, and that has been what has been their bad run of form. There's no shame to losing to this South Africa side 2-1 away from home, and then you've got the weird Australia series, and then last summer England went toe-to-toe with 2 very good sides. If they were the 4 semi-finalists in the World Cup, wouldn't be that surprised, even though South Africa, they've struggled to qualify for this Cricket World Cup, for the Cricket World Cup, but that's mostly because their form has just been weirdly split between this league and the stuff outside of it. I think outside of it, they're 8-2 in 8 wins, 2 defeats in ODIs.
Against really good teams.
Yeah, they've beaten Australia 3-0 and India 3-0 in that time.
They've had some really weak sides in games that mattered in terms of qualification.
Yeah, so that they're really good. They'll be a threat, and you look through that side, and it kind of all makes sense, I guess. Bavuma looks actually like a proactive tone-setting opener. You've got a proper anchor there in Van der Dussen. David Miller's record, you're talking about that 40 average 100 strike rate club. Even if you extend it beyond openers, there's very, very few that are in there, and he is one of those. And yeah, he's a properly brilliant one-day batter. And then yeah, the bowling attack again, kind of all the bases covered. You've got proper quicks, and you've got lots of them. You've got a left-arm angler in Janssen. You've got a clever wrist spinner in Shamsi. You've got a sort of an accurate one in Maharaj. They're a really good team.
Matt asks, today's one-handed reverse sweep is just the latest reason to love Moeen Ali. He's clearly a key figure in both white ball squad, but what exactly is his role at the moment, and is his place in danger? I was thinking about this quite a lot. So essentially, without Stokes, England have a dilemma. They want to have 6 bowlers, and to have 6 bowlers, you need to have one of your top 6 bowl. So Moeen, who is more of a 7 historically than a 6, and certainly in terms of recent ODI batting form, has to bat 6, or another all-rounder has to, and it's not that clear who it would be if it's not Moeen. So I think when you factor that in, I don't really think he's under that much.
No, I don't
danger.
think he is. I mean, he only misses. I like seeing him walk to the wicket at number 6. Actually, I kind of prefer it when he's got a little bit longer to go, because in my viewing experience, and I haven't got any statistics to back this up, but Moeen tends to depart the scene before the game is won quite often, and so having him come in as kind of like your last line and your finisher is not a great role for him. But at 6, he kind of can come in and kind of set it up for somebody else to do the deed at the end. So he also had quite a bit to say about bowling, didn't he? In one day internationals, and saying he didn't really enjoy it. He kind of felt that it was very unfair with the regulations with just 4 fielders outside, and it made it almost impossible to bowl, which was kind of talking yourself out of a gig, really.
He's done that before.
I know. Yeah, I mean, he's just honest to a fault, isn't he? But if Stokes decides that he is fully retired and is not coming back from the World Cup, then where else do England look? I suppose.
He also had a pretty good series with the bat.
He did. No, that's what I mean. He had a fantastic series with the bat, batting at 6, which I'm guessing he would. He's a top order batter at heart, isn't he? He always has been. But for England, he's always had to fulfil lots of different roles depending on what's going on around him. And 6 would appear to be sort of like a position where he'd be very comfortable. But again, if Stokes is available, then he bats there, and so that's the end of it, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Right? That's that conversation done. He then is the bowler in the top 6, and then basically you're picking in terms of conditions from there. Do you want the 2 spinners to play Mo and Rash, or are you going to play another seam bowler? So that then he becomes a squad player as opposed to somebody that's in the 11. And so I don't think that's changed at all. The only
Which he was in 2019.
No, and the only thing that changes is Ben, is what happens with him. But other than that, Mo's in and is a tremendously valuable member of that 11, 15, however many that they'll have.
Just on that one-handed reverse swat, my favourite thing about that was if you watch the slow motion replay, is just how early he decided to play it. It wasn't as if like this is a last minute adjustment. It was pretty much as the ball left the hand, it's like, yeah, one hand actually.
I've definitely been practicing it.
Yeah.
I've no doubt that this is their new thing.
I think it's interesting. I think Moeen could. I mean, we all know how good and talented Moeen is and how good he has been at a batter at some points. It is worth touching on just how long it is since he's been good at batting in one-day cricket. So between his last 2 half centuries, Ben Stokes has been arrested, missed an Ashes series, had a court case, been acquitted for a fray, won a World Cup final of his own back, played one of the all-time great Ashes Test innings, played another Ashes series, taken a year out of the game, and revolutionised England's Test side, and that's all come between 2
and won another World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. That's all become 2 Moeen Ali ODI 50+ scores, but.
Don't really want to think about what could happen between the next 2.
Yeah, exactly. But still, what do England do? Especially Buttler wants these options. It's trickier, I guess, when Root isn't there, because you then really don't have anyone in that top 5 who can bowl. You wonder what it looks like. I know, all of a sudden in the space of a week, Roy's back in form, Malan's jumped ahead of him again. But if you were to have a top 3 that was, say, Bairstow, Will Jacks, Joe Root, would you then have such a need for the number 6 to be a bowler? I don't know. And then there's also the question of Liam Livingstone as well, who obviously is a different sort of bowler. Moeen is, and how England have liked to use Moeen Ali. Like, people look at his average and say it's really bad, but that's not really his role. He's there to bowl 0 for 50, basically just put the game on pause for 10 overs, and then it allows you the freedom to
a left-hander bowler, isn't he, or whatever. I mean, Livingstone's another interesting role. I think we had this debate. It was on the radio after the last one, sort of saying that there is also the chance that Moeen might just decide enough's enough. 30, what is he, 35 or whatever? But another year goes by, and he might just think, I'm out of it, and he's paving the way to sort of to bow out with his comments about the bowling, and England will kind of slot Liam Livingstone in.
Yeah, I mean,
all of these things are possible.
I felt sorry for him from a bowling point of view. The boundary in the last game was so short. The straight boundary, like you Clarkson played one back foot punch for 6 off just a good length ball because it could. You can't do that on a normal ground. And
the other thing you notice with watching all the spinners bowl in that last game, perhaps more so than the other two in Bloemfontein, was just the line. They're all trying to bowl it down the leg side, basically trying to bowl the ball because of the 4 men out. There's always a huge gap. As soon as Shamsi got the ball outside off stump, he got hit for 6. So the rest of the time he ran up and bowled, pitching leg or outside, turning further down the leg side in order just to go for 1. You know what I mean? So it's not exactly attacking bowling, is it? And every time he tried to go outside off stump to try and get the ball on a line and length where he might be able to take a wicket, he just disappeared. And that's what Mo's talking about, isn't it? Is that kind of, that you have to bowl so defensively and hope that a batter kind of skews one up in the air and gets out. You're not really in it trying to attack, unless, of course, the pitch is turning miles, which you never know, we might see.
Simon asks, is the lack of opportunity for England players to play any 50-over cricket apart from a few internationals, has that left a problem for the men's World Cup defence? I guess every other country is basically in the same boat in that the top players don't really play domestic 50-over cricket. But what I would say, though, and I'm not saying England should have done this because I don't think the schedule would have allowed it, is that India have played so much international 50-over cricket recently, and it's let someone like Shubman Gill, who wasn't really on the scene 6 months ago, to play loads going into the World Cup, and he's an absolute nailed-on starter for the World Cup. If you compare him to someone like Harry Brook, who's basically the same age, thought of a similar level, Brook's only played 3 ODIs. But that, I don't think it was feasible for England to play more. I don't think anyone's been calling for England to play more ODI cricket. So yeah, I don't think that puts England in a worse position than anyone else.
No, and I don't think if you looked at the numbers in the lead up to the 2019 World Cup that 11 that played the final would have played much in the One Day Cup in those years preceding. It's almost, I think, if there were to be an issue with this, it's almost that you'll see it in another 5 years' time because maybe you'd say that those players needed that grounding in 40 or 50 over cricket to then go and be the one day side they were. But actually, right before a World Cup, the players who are going to be in your one day side are not going to be playing in the One Day Cup, no matter what the schedule is, I think.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right that most of the guys in the 2019 World Cup would have played a lot of that
in their youth
format at some point in their careers. But guys of Brooks' vintage or whatever are not, going forward, hardly going to play any at all. And that, that's, as we said at the time, it's an issue. Moving from 20 overs to 50 overs is a big old difference in terms of tempo as batters and things like that. I mean, watching, it was stark actually watching Sam Curran bowl in this series, in that when his the supercomputer in his brain that kind of that gets him to outthink or second guess batters when he's bowling them in 20 over cricket is not as useful in 50 over cricket. It just isn't, because the rates aren't as high. You know what I mean? The batters can actually react to the ball coming down. They haven't got 10 or 11, 12 runs and over in front of them that force them into playing in a certain way, which is where Curran is brilliant in the 20 over game. He looked much less likely to take a wicket or to be as effective when batters were sitting on 6s and 7s, and that's the differences in the sport. Somebody whose attributes are really, really dangerous and fantastic in the shortest form become much less so without the pace and the ability to remove people when they're just sitting there playing. In the slightly longer one. So that's another one to keep an eye
on. Some other news on the men's team this week. It's been reported that the likes of Alex Hale, Sam Billings, Liam Dawson and James Vince will play in the Pakistan Super League over England's tour of Bangladesh. But I assume you're broadly fine with that. These aren't centrally contracted players. In some, maybe even all of those cases, they're earning significantly more in the PSL than they are playing for England?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. And again, it doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what the England management think about it. And they are smart enough to understand that if you start issuing ultimatums to people around their participation in bilateral series playing for England versus their money earning power, then you're going to lose them for good. So they've had to leave the door open, and they've had to sort of be okay with it. And I don't, for a lot of people, and I completely agree with this side of the argument as well. If you turn down playing for your country, if you don't want to play for your country, then you should never be asked again, type of thing. But that's not the world we're living in anymore. Used to live in that world. Used to be that, if for whatever reason a player might decide they didn't want to go on a winter tour or whatever, whether it was, mental health, bad form, having a baby, whatever it might be, then you would kind of be frowned upon and put at the back of the queue for selection the next time. The selectors and English cricket had just as much of an ego as certain players did around what went and what didn't back in the day. But we're long past all of that now. If the captain and coach and Rob Key and the team feel that a player is going to be useful for England to win a tournament at some point, then they're very willing to kind of to play. To talk to the player and say, okay, well, what do you want to do? How is this looking? Where are you going to be getting your cricket? And then from X point, we'll need you back, but you can go with our blessing to go and do this. And I think that's the only way you can navigate it. Otherwise, you end up with players just deciding that they can have an easier life, less stress, earn more money, spend more time at home, and not worry about it at all. And then you're in a situation that a lot of cricketing nations around the world that don't have the finances of an England, Australia, or India, they're finding themselves in that situation where there's nothing you can do. You just can't persuade them to come and play. So you've lost them forever.
I mean, Hales is someone who's actually didn't put his a name in the hat for the IPL because he earns quite a lot of money from the Pakistan Super League, and in the IPL he was unlikely to get a top contract. Someone like Hales gets paid a lot of money from the PSL that the ECB can't pay him, really. Like
not for bilateral, not for a tour of Bangladesh, and not for exactly. So, and I think and this is just my own view. I don't know this for fact, so it's not gospel truth. But my feeling is that Alex Hales is probably is done with 50 over cricket anyway. I mean, people might sort of say, well, he'd be a great option at the top of the order. Well, maybe, but I'm not entirely sure he's all that bothered about playing 50 over cricket. So, in which case, the situation we're in is the right one.
The Wisden shop is delighted to announce that the limited edition Cricket Grounds Great Britain illustration is now back in stock after yet another sellout run. Every single Test and County Championship ground has been included in the largest and most detailed piece of penmanship by artist Ben Staves. It is that one there. I think Butch is putting it on screen for the YouTube viewers. In and amongst the cricket venues, look out for the towns and cities of the United Kingdom, each with their own iconic architectural landmarks. As ever, you can get that from wisden.com/shop. India were the first ever winners of the Women's Under-19 World Cup this week. They comfortably beat England in the final. England qualified for that final after winning a low-scoring thriller against Australia in the semis. They defended 99 in that game, with Grace Scrivens, the England captain, taking the final wicket. Scrivens was named the player of the tournament. The Women's T20 World Cup starts in just over a week. The big news around that this week was that Dane van Niekerk will not be part of the South Africa squad after failing a fitness test. Van Niekerk is obviously one of South Africa's standout players. Without her, they are significantly weakened. Guy asks, how do you feel about the invasive and personal nature of the Van Niekerk story? Not everyone is built the same. Her performance has been improving, so this seems pretty unfair as a single red line. Surely you tailor to the individual rather than hanging her out to dry. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a massively complicated situation, I think, and it's also because this isn't just an isolated incident. This goes back to the stuff with Lizelle Lee last year when she was kind of forced into retirement because of South Africa not being happy with her fitness and therefore her being unlikely to get an NOC to play in the 100. And I think in that case with Lizelle Lee, there was quite a lot of sort of like rumour and reports in the media and all that sort of thing that went around rather than it being sort of clarified instantly. And that was also not ideal. So I think Cricket South Africa have probably gone too far the other way. I mean, Dane van Niekerk, she's not played for South Africa in quite a long time now, almost 18 months, I think. Yeah. After breaking her ankle. And so they could have just said her fitness is not at a stage where we need it to be, rather than saying she has missed this specific cutoff thing, I guess. On the decision itself, I mean, it's a tricky one. And there's no doubting that whether she can run 2 kilometres in 9.5 minutes or not, that Dane van Niekerk would improve this South Africa side if you slotted her in it tomorrow. I don't think that would even really be disputed by Cricket South Africa. I don't think they're saying that you have to be able to run this to be good at cricket almost. It's more that it's a standard they want to keep everyone to. And I guess the thing that they're saying is if we allow for one person to sort of get away from this marker, then that will harm the team further down the line, because you're less able to stick to those things for other players and that sort of thing, which I buy to an extent, but I also, I mean,
they are a worse cricket team without Van Niekerk.
That's the thing. Is it more complicated than that? Maybe it is, but also kind of probably it isn't. I also think that Van Niekerk, she is a very, very hard worker. She's a brilliant leader. Like she's not ever going to be any sort of bad influence, any sort of like as if that because she is not going to be the one that's the reason why other people are shirking the line. She's going to be people who are that someone who's keeping people to that. And you've seen so Marizanne Kapp is her wife and has taken a leave of absence for the final of the T20I series they're playing at the moment, tri-series they're playing, just to be with Van Niekerk now. And so there's also the factor of that kind of internal squad dynamics as well. Like if you have if you maybe have some people in the squad who maybe agree with the decision, I don't know, and then you have Kapp there who's quite vocally against it. There's quite a lot going on there, but I think centrally she is very, very good at leg spin bowling and at batting and at captaining, and South Africa are going to miss that. And that there is, it's tricky. Like if I don't want to be too like, it was better in the good old days and that sort of thing, but there were definitely times early in his career, for example, when Shane Warne would not have been able to run a 2 kilometres in 8.5 minutes. And it's also the case that if we agree that part of what made Shane Warne good was his personality and that aura, and how that enabled him to maybe get in batters' minds and to love the game and play the game with that sort of energy, and that was one of the things that made him good. Can you have that sort of player and then also demand that they fit to some sort of strict
but obviously having been in the professional game, the standards for these things are generally quite loose, simply because you have to try and make sure that everybody can pass. I mean, that's the point. Dependent on your team and its age and whatever the standards you're trying to set, you can move those goalposts around. Now, I don't know how many times this test was failed. I don't know how many times that there'd been conversations between Cricket South Africa and Dane van Niekerk.
Yeah, I think there are other questions over Cricket South Africa's handling of this. There was a very good piece by Firdaus Munda which has some information in it. So some of the things that she was saying was that Van Niekerk was kind of training away from the South Africa team, and that also this was the first time actually kind of since rejoining them that she'd actually run this 2 kilometres thing. And also, so at one point they've reduced the cutoff from 10 minutes to 9.5 minutes, and this 9 minutes 48 that Van Niekerk run was apparently a personal best for her. So it's not as if even her fitness has maybe dropped since returning from this. She's just almost maybe the same fitness, but that's now no longer good enough. But then it also kind of feels like they maybe haven't worked with her enough to monitor how she was getting on, to sort of be saying you might struggle to this. This is you need to.
I mean,
bring this
and all of that's fine. I mean, again, the organisation makes its decisions over its players. I mean, it really isn't for us to sort of decide whether it's the right thing. To answer the question that the guy was saying about sort of hanging her out to dry, it's kind of professional sport. It really is. I don't think it's not personal or anything like that. They've set a standard. Captain has failed to meet it. and they've made that decision. You can have a go at Cricket South Africa, but what else were they going to say? We've left her out, but not give the reason.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you expect them to do?
Yeah, I just think the timing is crazy.
Oh, absolutely,
they've got a home World Cup.
Absolutely, it is.
What 10 days before the first game at a home World Cup, they've dropped their captain.
Completely and utterly bonkers.
And she's not just their captain; she's clearly one of their best 2 players. When one of their other gun players retired
there also must be other parts of the story that we don't know. You know, Dane van Niekerk John Batty left her out here. She didn't captain the Oval Invincibles, did they, when they defended their title in the 100? That also was tricky, and we never really got to the bottom of what that was all about either. So there's a little bit of a pattern been happening here. Will South Africa be a better cricket team for it? No. Will they have to stick by that standard for other players going forward? Yes. Magala had a similar issue, didn't he? The big South African quick, about missing his targets, and then eventually managed to sneak under whatever the time was, and they brought him back into the side. So, I mean, with all of these things, the onus ends up being on the player, doesn't it? Can you knock 20 seconds off your 9.5K? Probably yes. Did they give her enough time to do it? No, well, that's a question for their board. But on the basic level, if that's what you have to do and you don't make it, then there's only one person that's to blame. Unfortunately. Back
to the Women's World Cup, there are 2 groups of 5. The top 2 from each group qualify for the semi-finals. England are in a group with India, Pakistan, Ireland, and West Indies. So you'd expect England and India to come through that group, and then Australia and New Zealand are in a group with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and host South Africa. Again, I'd say Australia and New Zealand are probably favourites for that one.
So I mean, South Africa would be pretty good. So they're playing in that final against India today, and that will be a good game. And they're even without. I guess that's the thing that's sad about Van Niekerk and Lee as well, is that this is a home World Cup with a South Africa side that has actually regularly threatened the top end of these competitions. They were semi-finalists and actually the second best team in the group stage really in the 2023 World Cup. They were very unlucky not to get to the final of the 2020 T20 World Cup. They obviously were heartbreakingly beat one in the 2017 World Cup semi-final. So in terms of tournament pedigree, you'd put South Africa ahead of New Zealand. I would probably shade New Zealand ahead of them. On England's group, West Indies are like kind of hopeless at the moment. I mean, Stephanie Taylor's injured, which hasn't helped. But if you
think she's in their squad though.
Okay, well that's good because they've been very, very bad in this tri-series, worse than you'd even expect for a West Indies team who's kind of underperformed. So they've had totals of 94, 97, 111 and 97 in their 4 games in that tri-series, which is not great.
We've got some live breaking news. England have announced a pair of squads for that Bangladesh tour that Ben mentioned earlier. I can't find the squad. Where?
Shall I read it off?
Ben, do you want to read it?
So, ODI squad, you've got Joss Buttler, Tom Abel, Rian Ahmed. So, Abel and Ahmed both first-time ODI call-ups. Moeen Ali, Jofra Archer, Sam Curran, Sakiba Mood,
nice.
Dab Malan, Adil Rashid, Roy, Salt, Topley. James Vince is in the ODI squad. Chris Wokes and Mark Wood. And then in T20s, similar squad, Butler, Abel, Ahmed, Moeen, Archer, Curran, all in that. So Duckett's in the T20 squad, but not in the ODI squad.
Interesting.
Jax is also in the T20 squad, but not the ODI squad. Jordan's in that, kind of as you expect. Malan, Adil Rashid, Salt, Topley, Wokes and Wood. So I guess Tom Abel is a bit of a bolt from the blue. Obviously, they like him. He's been capturing the Lions. He's a very sort of, he's been around for quite a long time and has had an up and down career for Somerset. Was made to capture them at an early age.
He shares a birthday with you, not just the date, the exact day, but you were born on the same day.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
so if you've ever wondered how old Tom Abel Ben is, just look up Tom Abel on Quick Info.
Yeah, and it means I'm not too old still to get my England call up if that's maybe making a debut now. And then Rian Ahmed, I guess that could be fascinating in those 2 squads. Talk about that Moeen Ali conversation.
Yeah,
Rian Ahmed has. There's a world in which Rian Ahmed featured in that 2023 World Cup, I think. So yeah.
Well summarised. The Border-Gavaskar series isn't too far away, but I almost think this is a more exciting series than the Ashes in terms of how consistently good it is, and that both teams are capable of winning a Test match and the other country, which you don't always get with the Ashes.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's a belter because the the potential for banter is quite high, isn't it? You've got the Indians with the very nationalistic view on and everything, wanting to be top dogs at cricket, and Australia who think it's their birthright to be top dogs at cricket. It's just perfect. It's one of the most niggly and greatest series that go around. I think India are the favourites for sure. Australia's spin cupboard is not bare in particular, but it's not as potent as it might be. And Nathan Lyon's sort of returns have been sort of diminishing of late. But again, quicks. India can call upon some terrific quicks, as can Australia. The batting wise, they've got a couple of lineups that can both be very, very aggressive. And as long as we don't end up with less than optimal pitches, it should be a cracking series.
Just on India, they are without Bumrah for the start of the series at least. Shreyas Iyer has been ruled out of the first test, and obviously Pant's out for the series as well. Yeah,
so I'd imagine that the pitches will aid the spinners a lot, whether they're the kind of 2-day test surfaces or if they're just kind of giving assistance throughout.
Australia have just had their own 2-day test match nonsense as well, haven't they, in Brisbane? So they're not immune from that. And we had a 2-day one here at the Oval when the Queen died at the back of the year. But I think there is always the sort of like a world of difference between too much moisture being left in a pitch, or the weather, meaning that moisture doesn't come out of it as fast as you like, and a pitch that has never seen water, because one of those things is a decision made, and the other one is something that sometimes is beholden to weather. So
yeah, but
we'll see. Well, I mean, I would love to see the pitches turn for sure.
And in a way, it would be almost more interesting because if Australia were to triumph on that, then there would be no questioning it as a triumph, I guess. And I think we talked about it before, but it's fascinating in that Australia probably have the batter you'd most expect, maybe the two batters you'd most expect to have a dominant series in Labuschagne and Smith. But there is such a big question over the other, 3 or 4, the other 4 in that top 6, 3 because they've kind of been to those sort of conditions and struggled before. And then Cameron Green because he's so young, and whether Green even gets on the park because he's likely to miss the first test at least, or he's not going to be able to bowl in the first test. And then also I think there is a question over Lyon, who's obviously he's a great of the game. He's been a big part of this very good Australia side, but has never played a significant part in a series win in Asia, which for a spinner is quite a big thing to not have checked off, especially a spinner of the stature of Lyon. So whether he can bowl on the level of Ashwin and Jadeja, who it looks like will be fit, will also go a big way to deciding it, I guess.
I think Jadeja took a 7th in his first class game back from injury. Ben, Mickey Arthur's got a new job, but he's also still at Derbyshire. Can you explain that one, please?
Yeah, well, they're calling him, originally they were calling him the online coach, which is quite funny way of putting it. He was going to do it all over Zoom. It seems like he's going to be maybe a team director, but also of Pakistan. But they're not going to have a head coach, so he kind of is a head coach.
But he's also the Derbyshire head coach at the same time.
Yeah, and you wonder how Derbyshire feel about this, that he's like, no, I'm sure I can do both. And they'll be like, can you, Mickey? Like, he is a guy who never stops thinking about cricket, who is always like wanting to find a young player who can sculpt them to the next big thing.
I've been with him for the last week, and he didn't mention it at all. I read it on the paper on the way in on the way in on the train to London Bridge the other day. He kept it very quiet.
You can kind of imagine how that conversation went. Pakistan approached Mickey Arthur. Mickey Arthur says, no, actually, I want to concentrate on Derbyshire. Pakistan then say, you can do both. And Mickey Arthur says, really?
Are you sure about
Are you sure?
I imagine Mickey Arthur is probably not saying no in like the most forceful ways. You know when you like you don't want to do like a plan with a friend or something, but you don't want to say I just really can't face it, and you sort of half think of an excuse, and they're kind of really making like, oh no, we can rearrange this, and you're like, and you don't want to say I just can't do it, and that's what's happened with Mickey Arthur and the PCB. He's like, I've kind of got plans that day, I kind of don't really want to, and they're like, no, you can do this, and eventually he's like, oh yeah, sure, fine. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Then they're not hugely happy about it. It seems within the ex-cricketers in Pakistan, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. No, I mean they've all missed out on a job, haven't they? They're saying there are loads of good coaches in Pakistan, and it's like, I wonder who.
At least they're on the same continent.
Yeah.
And our now weekly feature, Ben, tell us what's happened in the franchise world so none of us have to watch it.
Yes, well,
We got
are you timing it?
Yeah, hang on. 2 minutes starting now.
So the game of the week was in the Bangladesh Premier League. You had 90s for Shai Hope and Tammy McBal. Then Rizwan hit a quick 70. Camilla Victor was off to a good start, but it was Johnson Charles who based nothing until Rizwan got out. He was 34.
You can slow down.
He was 34 off 31, and then he hit 7 sixes in 13 balls and wins the game, basically in the space of 3 overs, chasing 213. So makes a 53 ball hundreds. That's 66 of his last, or if his next 22 balls. It was mad. That's the main thing from the BPL. In the T20, Adam Zampa has 420 on his back and is bowling very well. Billings pulled off an amazing stumping / run out of Kent's teammate Joe Denley. So friction in the dressing room when they reunite back there. Denley sort of blocked it down by his toes, sort of bounced away on the offside. Billings sort of takes off, pounces, grabs it, flings it behind him without looking at the stumps. Denley sort of a little bit dozy and getting back in, and the bails are off. Dan Mousley and Karen Pollard put on 89 and 5.2 overs. Maybe that's a passing the baton moment between two greats in the game.
Dan Mousley,
Yeah.
nice work.
It was quite funny seeing fans in the road outside the stadium basically running into the road, fetching the balls and either just sprinting away with them or throwing them back into the stadium. Some quite good arms on show there. The BBL is somehow still going on. 5 of the 8 teams in the group stage make the finals, and they really drag out that last sort of 7 or 22 knockout games or whatever it is. Anyway, the last pre-final game is going on today. Looks like Brisbane Heat facing Perth Scorchers in the final, but all the test guys will be gone, so that could be quite a low quality affair. And if I can just dip into the Ranji Trophy for the last bit, the Ranji Trophy's quarterfinals have been good. Sarashtra's Path Butt hit an amazing 100, based on nothing in his professional career up until now. Comes in at number 9, Cider 147 for 8, and hits 111 to take them to 303. It was an amazing sort of skip down the track and then a slog sweep to get to his first ever 50, which is great. And Hanuma Vihari broke his hand and then came out to play some Moeen-esque one-handed swipes, which is also quite fun.
And that is your 2 minutes. Fantastically done. I don't think we give you enough credit for actually following that much cricket each week.
That's why he's looking so old.
Tom Abel's age.
Couple of other pieces of news to round off before we finish. India beat New Zealand 2-1 in a T20I series. Shubman Gill scored his 4th international 100 of 2023 in the series finale. The curator of the Look Now pitch used for the second game of that series has been sacked. India chased down 100 with just 1 ball to spare after the game. India captain Hardik Pandya said, to be honest, it was a shocker of a wicket.
Just actually, I think there might be something a bit more significant in that Pandya is technically not the full-time T20I captain. That's still Rohit Sharma, but having the power to dismiss a pitch curator just by a decree is usually only reserved for full-time India captains.
In fairness there, I don't think that was just Pandya. I think there was an explanation that was put out on why the pitch was really bad. And at the Oval, we're here, you can see 2 or 3 weeks out of an international that they are preparing that pitch for the international.
He just wasn't doing it.
Basically wasn't doing it.
Fine, fair enough.
And he's been replaced by someone who has done prepared for international pitches before.
Yeah, the only that was a fun game still though. It's quite nice to have T20s that expose a different skill set sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And finally, England Lions are playing Sri Lanka at the moment. Matt Fisher took a 5-foot in the first innings, where Sri Lanka were bowled out for not many, and then Tom Haines scored 100 on his England Lions debut. He averages just over 38 in first class cricket. England Lions scored 450 odd at more than 5 and over. So yeah, they're still doing that. Anyway, that is all we have time for on today's show. Cheers, Ben. Cheers, Butch. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back early next week.